It's my pleasure to introduce our mayor, Malcolm Brodie. Some elementary schools in Richmond take the time to bring their young students to City Hall. And if their timing is right, those students have the opportunity to meet the mayor. Well, some of those young professionals in this room today probably had the opportunity to meet Mayor Brodie when they were just 6 or 7 years old. He's our longest serving mayor in Richmond, first sworn in following a by-election in 2001, and he's been leading Richmond ever since, succeeding in 7 subsequent elections, most recently in 2022. That wasn't said to make you feel old, Mayor Brodie, just to show your commitment for the city of Richmond. Before entering politics, Mayor Brodie was a practicing lawyer, and he had a long record of service to Richmond in the volunteer community. Today, he continues to be a strong leader in Richmond and across our region. He serves as a leader on many Metro Vancouver committees, and he leads our city. Thank you for today, and I'd like you to come up and share with us all of the wonderful things that are happening in Richmond.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for all of you coming out today to celebrate as we're coming well past the pandemic and the Chamber is able to get back to the live luncheons. And I want to start right there with the Chamber of Commerce that does such excellent work in the service of our business community. And we very much appreciate them asking me to speak at today's luncheon. I had no idea that it was the 12th, but here we are. I also want to say how much I appreciate the city councilors who have joined us. Almost all of them were able to come today. We're also going to welcome a person who was a little bit late, who got mentioned before, but our Member of Parliament for Richmond East, Parm Bays, is with us. Stand up. So what I'm going to do today is what I've done in the past, if you can recall. I'll make my verbal presentation, and then we'll have a Q&A session. Following that, at the end of the luncheon, because there's so much more I can put into a written form of a report, each of you will be given an actual, the annual address in a written form. And so I do hope that you'll take a look through that. And if you've got any questions on it, I think you know how to get a hold of me. So 2023 promises to be a very good year in our city. After the long COVID-19 pandemic, our city council feels very confident about our future and takes great pride in the many achievements that have been realized over the past year. In 2022, we saw a number of significant changes in local government and in our senior administration. I think you probably know these two councillors, Harold Steeves and Linda McPhail. They decided that they were going to retire, and of course we're going to miss their great dedication and long service to Richmond. Yeah, let's hear it for them. And following an election in October, we welcomed Laura Galanders and Cash Heed as new members of City Council. Let's hear it for them. Both of them have very strong and diverse backgrounds, and they are going to really complement our City Council, and I certainly look forward to working with all of City Council as we meet the challenges that we face. We also introduced the former Richmond senior staff member, Serena Lusk. That's the council. That's Serena. Let's, Serena, stand up. I think you know that Serena is a person you need to know when you're working with the city and you're trying to get your whatever it is done. So we do welcome Serena after the departure of longtime CAO George Duncan. We also welcomed in the Richmond Fire Rescue, Chief Jim Wishlove. I think Jim is here today, aren't you? Stand up, Jim. And in the RCMP, we have a new officer in charge, Chief Superintendent Dave Chohan. Dave, where are you? Oh, way off in the corner. So we certainly want to thank all the retirees and say how much we're looking forward to the new group. Now, before I talk about the current situation, I want to show you a video. This is a video of our past. It's the first in a series called Richmond Stories. This one's entitled Growth of a City. It's a short video. You can find it on YouTube. And I'm showing this to you because I think it's very important when we're talking about what our city is doing and has been doing and is going to do. I think that you need to put it into some kind of a historical context that kind of elicits the values that we find to be important. So let's see if I can get this thing going.
The Richmond that you see today may at first glance seem different from 100 years ago, but today's city is very much rooted in our past. Richmond, bordered by the Fraser River and the Georgia Strait, has always been a watery place, made up of islands that shift with the currents and rainfall. Indigenous nations traveled along these waterways, harvesting berries and roots, hunting deer and beaver, fishing for salmon and sturgeon. These same watery routes were traveled by early settlers who saw challenges in what lay before them. While the land was already being used, settlers sought to make it theirs in the likeness of their homelands. A survey created a grid system which divided the land into equal squares to be sold, settled, and farmed. Like indigenous nations before them, settlers used the waterways to travel between places. And because most of the land was so wet, colonial settlements were built on the few places that were dry enough for construction. Early settlers built dikes and ditches to drain the land, replacing the fishing and navigation sloughs that were used for many generations by diverse indigenous nations. Once Richmond dried out, construction began. Workers, including Chinese laborers, most from the provinces of Guangdong and Fujian, built roads, rail, dikes, bridges, and tram lines. In Steveston, housing for workers was built close to the water, with the white managers' homes constructed farther inland. On November 10, 1879, Lulu Island and Sea Island were incorporated as the township of Richmond. The first town hall was constructed along with stores. The Japanese Fishermen's Benevolent Society funded the first hospital in Richmond, which was open to everyone. Over the next few decades, Richmond continued to grow. In 1909, the Minaroo Racetrack became an early airfield, signaling a new era of growth. A major milestone would be reached with the opening of the Vancouver Airport in 1931. With the automobile and construction of the Oak Street Bridge and the George Massey Tunnel, Richmond's population grew and suburban neighborhoods sprung up seemingly overnight. Shopping malls soon followed, as well as Canada's first McDonald's. It wasn't until the 1960s that the building code was changed to allow for buildings higher than 3 stories. Richmond was on its way to becoming a global city. Starting in the 1970s, larger waves of immigrants from the Philippines, Taiwan, Vietnam, and India would settle in Richmond. In the late 80s, Hong Kong residents, uncertain about the transfer of Hong Kong from the UK to China, began to search for homes elsewhere. These transformations would make Richmond a destination. Today, Chinese immigrants comprise the largest groups of the new Richmond residents. This has ushered in a new era of urban growth in Richmond, with another milestone set by the 2009 completion of the Rapid Transit Canada line ahead of the 2010 Olympics. The Richmond that you see today may at first glance seem very different from 100 years ago, but today's city is very much rooted in our past. It continues to be an important place for Indigenous peoples who have maintained strong connections to the area. It is a garden city by nature that embraces and celebrates its diversity, welcomes newcomers, and plans for future generations.
So today, what I'd like to do is to address a number of areas. We'll review 2022 and what went on and foresee what is coming. Specifically, I want to look at these areas: economic recovery and investment, supporting our community, innovation and sustainability, connecting the community, and finally, keeping Richmond safe. Generally, the city is transitioning as highlighted by the post-pandemic economic challenges and the increasingly forceful impacts of climate change. In 2022, through policies and actions, the City Council worked tirelessly to support our 230,000 residents and almost 14,000 businesses. Richmond continues to be a safe, strong, active and resilient city, thanks to wise investments, sound management, and innovative action. So turning, first of all, to economic recovery and investments. Much of the current focus is now on our economy as we encounter some of the highest inflation and interest rates that we've seen in decades. The pandemic emphasized the importance of sustaining a resilient and diversified business sector. On the negative side, during the pandemic, sectors such as aviation and tourism really experienced some closures with some resulting job losses. But on the positive side, there was growth in other fields such as logistics, e-commerce, and high tech. Business investment and growth supported by implementation of the city's resilient economy strategy has resulted in sustained job creation. Richmond businesses now provide around 130,000 local jobs. Now that's one of the strongest jobs to worker ratios in the entire region, so Richmond does continue to be a very important employment center. Last year, we saw an increase of almost 20% in new business licenses issued compared to the previous year. And though Richmond provides one of the largest industrial land inventories in the region with more than 45 million square feet of built industrial space, vacancy is less than 2%. So the city has emphasized the need for a more intensive use of our industrial land. The city is constantly upgrading technology. So last July, an online business licensing portal was launched called My Business. And you'll see, if you look at one of the cards that's at every place, this refers to My Business. And My Business is going to provide the ability to conveniently process business licenses 24/7. And right now, the city is doing that for 20% of the businesses who have now signed up to participate, and by the day, that number is growing. We found that the pandemic changed how the city interacts with many in the community. So generally, more services are going to be available online. And even though there are more remote and hybrid work models for employees, demand for the office space remains strong. So for instance, in the city center, you'll find that the vacancy rate for office space is something less than 5%. Construction and development are emerging from the challenges posed by the shutdowns, the labor shortages, increased costs, and supply chain delays. And our city is refining the planning process through what's called the Permit Optimization Project. And the result is going to be a better, more cost-effective process for all development applicants. Last year, the city issued building permits valued at over $925 million. And there's a number of significant projects that were involved, and I want to just run through a couple of them, of 3 or 4 of them. First of all, there's the Celtic Paramount site. This is the building with a stunning First Nations themed facade and the artwork at the intersection of number 3 Road with Cook Road. You'll find 530 residential units, and it includes affordable housing units, and there's also a large, very large childcare hub, which is there to support the young families, particularly in that neighborhood. Then across the street at the Richmond Center, we have our appeal from the Richmond Center here today. At Richmond Center, the phased development of the southern portion of the shopping mall site is now well underway. When it's finished, you're going to find, in addition to the retail and the entertainment districts, you'll find a publicly accessible plaza and nearly 2,300 homes, including the market rentals and the affordable housing. In Steveston, this is the artist's depiction of the new community center and the library. We broke ground on that project this last year. It's been long awaited, $95 million project, and it includes a 3-story, 60,000 square foot facility, double gymnasium, fitness center, et cetera, and of course, a very extensive library. Now, moving back to the city center, we have Lux by Town Line. Construction has started on this site, which is the project at Lansdowne and number 3 Road on the northwest corner. And this is right across the street from the Canada Line station, so of course it's going to be transit-oriented development with 360 residential homes, including affordable housing. There's going to be office space, nonprofit organizational space, and street-oriented retail. Out in Hamilton, this is a site that has been demolished, and approval was given for another development in the midst of the emerging Hamilton Village Center featuring residential units with affordable housing. There will also be in this site about 25,000 square feet of commercial space. Now this year, to reflect the overall values and development patterns across our city, we've embarked on a review of our official community plan. Public and stakeholder engagement will help to shape the city's future direction, and it will lead us right into the next generation. While we envision the future, planning and development does not only involve the opening of new and exciting projects, particularly with the extreme weather events that we've seen for the past 2 years, we have to plan and prepare. For example, we worked on flood protection. Here's pictures of some of the dikes around the island. And I'm sure most of you are in this boat. If you're talking to someone and they find you live or you work in Richmond or both, the first thing they ask you is whether when the big one comes, are we going to be underwater? And the answer is no. You can take it from me. We're working with other levels of government, and with that kind of partnership, we were able to raise 1.5 kilometers of dikes, and we constructed some pump stations to add to one of the most comprehensive flood protection systems in the entire province. And these are a couple of the pump stations that we have. Now, to assist residents during extreme weather events, several initiatives were undertaken, including the enhanced maintenance and upgrades of the city's drainage system. And at the end of last year and this last weekend, Our snow and ice response crews pre-treated or de-iced over 65,000 kilometers of roads. And that is the same as driving from here to New York and back 7 times. So you can see the kind of effort that was involved. Now let's turn to supporting our community. One of the most significant challenges that we currently face in Richmond and is faced by all the cities right across the province is housing supply and affordability. And with all of the issues, unfortunately, housing starts somewhat decreased last year, and that was right across the region that happened, but I'm sure that that's going to be reversed soon. What you see in the picture is Astor Place. We have to take care and help out the people who have no home or the people who are at risk of having no home. So we partnered on this project with BC Housing. It's called Astor Place. It's right across from Costco at the north end of Garden City. This is a 40-unit modular building similar to the Alderbridge site right across from Rona that you've probably seen. To supplement those 2 projects, we also have emergency spaces at the shelter in South Richmond. We have a warming center in the South Arm Community Center, and we have a drop-in center and a shower program at Brighouse Park Pavilion. The City Council last year also increased the requirements for rental housing to be included in the major developments. The expectation can be as much as 30% of the floor area is to be devoted to various kinds of rental projects. Overall, several rezoning applications for a total of 2,500 units, multifamily units, they received initial approval by council last year. And of that total, 40% are rental units at various rates. The largest projects are these that you see depicted. Now, of course, they're not built, so all you can see is artist's concept. But in the top left-hand corner, that's the Talisman Park project by Polygon at Cambie and Garden City Roads. When it's finished, it's multi-phase, but when it's finished, there will be 1,350 homes, including the affordable housing and the market rentals. And the green area at the bottom of that picture, that's along Cambie, and that's going to be a new city park. The top right-hand is a large-scale mixed-use project by Dava on Sexsmith Road. And that calls for almost 400 multifamily units, including the affordable housing, the low-end market rentals, and the market rentals themselves. There's going to be over 30,000 square feet for a church in this overall complex, and there's going to be a child care facility. And we're also very pleased there is a 1930s heritage residence called the Hurling Residence on that site. And with DAVA, we worked with them, and they've guaranteed that they will preserve that, and we will have that for future generations. The 2 projects that are on the bottom, they were dedicated rental projects. One is on Cook Road, one's on Azure Road. They are fully rental, combined 670 units. Now, the provision of childcare is another very important service that we provide to young families. Overall, there are over 600 city-owned licensed childcare spaces, including 200 that were opened last year. Another childcare center is going to be open near the Oval. That's going to be opened later this month, so we're looking forward to that. Now let's turn to innovation and sustainability. Our community energy and emissions plan envisions a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and a net zero emissions by 2050. So let's look at a few examples of how we've adopted sustainable approaches last year. First of all, Richmond has become a national leader in advancing the circular economy concepts for the extended use of our resources in our operations. We aim to be fully circular by 2050. And for our award-winning district energy, we've won a lot of awards on this one. We secured the money for expansion. So through the Canada Infrastructure Bank, we were able to secure $175 million at low interest rates. And that will enable the district energy to expand from the current 5 million square feet, where it heats and cools that amount of floor space. By 2050, we think that that will be well over 50 million square feet. So it is very significant. And under our zero emissions strategy, we've won awards for the sustainability of our fleet. Last year, for the city purchases of vehicles for our fleet, almost half were plug-in electrics or the full battery electric vehicles. Last year alone, we installed dozens of the level 2 and level 3 chargers, and the bottom picture displays the first solar-powered level 2 electric vehicle charging station, which is at Gary Point Park. Now, Richmond was among the first to adopt a ban on the commercial use of single-use plastics. The aim is to eliminate the commercial use of plastic straws, bags, and foam containers. The bylaw became enforceable last September, and the experiences show that most of the businesses are fully complying. We think that that was for a number of reasons, that compliance. The biggest one is that we had a couple of years before it became in force and effect. We worked with the chamber and we worked directly with many of the business organizations and the businesses to make sure that they knew what was coming and the kind of changes that were going to be required. And so they were able to just transition their operations to comply. We have our water conservation program. This is one of the water meters in front of a residence. We started that program over 20 years ago to attach a water meter to every single family residence in the city. So for the single family, we're up to 100%. For the multifamily, we've still got some ways to go, but we're working on it. So in those 20 years, roughly, our total water consumption has decreased by 14%, while our population has increased by 26%. So you can see the saving. That equates to about $10 million per year that we as a city are able to save in water purchases. And again, we've been recognized for our commitment to functional energy efficient buildings. And a good example is the Minneru Center for Active Living depicted here. We received 2 awards last year for innovation and encouraging healthy lifestyles. Now we're going to turn to connecting our community. Richmond is known internationally as a tourism destination. We have now seen a rebound in the tourism and hospitality sector. Among other features, the tourists will note our rich maritime heritage, the culinary delights of so many of our restaurants, and the beauty of our many trails. Our 26 hotels are very pleased that the international airport continues its operational recovery to bring passenger volumes closer to pre-pandemic levels. The CEO of the airport, Tamara Vrooman, she presented to council a couple of weeks ago, and what she told us was that pre-pandemic, the passenger volumes were about 26 million per year. Of course, it dropped like a rock as everything shut down, but they're now back up to 23 million. So you can see that that recovery is real, and it's going to continue. Our city is also committed to supporting the parks and the trails with over 140 parks and hundreds of kilometers of trails and on-road cycling paths. Last year, we opened several new parks, Three of them are depicted here. In the bottom right is Alexandra Park. The building you see is the District Energy Building, but there's a park there. It's called Alexandra Park. On the top right, you will see at the Aberdeen Neighborhood Park, the second phase of that, and to the left, there is the Tate Riverfront Community Park in Bridgeport, which is right along the river. At the south foot of number 3 Road, we also have the newly renamed Bark Park, which is an off-leash dog park adjacent to the newly strengthened South Dyke. And I'll see you there. Filming in our city has always been very popular. It's rebounding now. Over the years, many popular series and movies have been filmed in various places in our city. Last year, the filming location permits, the number of them rose to over 75 last year, and that is going to go straight up. Last year, the revenue was $250,000, and I expect that to really grow over time. In recreation, Richmond was named BC's most active community in the Participation Community Better Challenge, and in the registration in the day camp program and in the volunteer hours rose dramatically. Over at the Oval, that remained a magnet for recreational and high-level athletes throughout the year. It rebounded last year with significant increases in almost all aspects of its operation, including the number of events which were hosted, the visitations, the programs, the youth camps, the sports camps, the training sessions, and whatever. And also, very importantly, the Games Operating Trust, which is handling the legacy monies from the 2010 Olympic Winter Games, that has continued to provide strong results to subsidize much of the operations of the Oval. We also saw last year the return of some of the major festivals and the events. Here we have the Cherry Blossom Festival. That was staged virtually last year. It's going to be live and in person in April this year. Of course, the Stevenson Salmon Festival was able to be hosted live, and they marked their 75th anniversary with an in-person event, and 40,000 people were able to attend the Maritime Festival in August. So finally, turning to keeping Richmond safe. Another top priority of City Council is to keep our residents and our businesses among the safest in the province. We always support investments to protect our community and to embrace diversity. So last year, we were able to open the 10,000 square foot City Center Community Police Office, depicted in the top left there. And we added the final 16 police officers in keeping with Council's Safe Community program, where over a number of years we added to the complement 91 officers. At Richmond Fire Rescue, we welcomed an unprecedented 27 new firefighters to the local complement. And I can say we need to pause there for a second because there have been issues over the years with diversity. I think that department is really diverse now. Over 10% of our active firefighters are women, and many of the firefighters self-identify as First Nations, Asian, and Middle Eastern. So looking back on the past year, Richmond City Council and staff can be very proud as we work together to emerge from the challenges of the pandemic. Looking forward this year, we expect to see, as an example, the Capstan Canada Line Station. We want that to be finished off. The Capstan Community Center, we want to get that open and finished. There's the Stevenson Community Center in the library, which we talked about before. We want to make major headway on that project. And we're also converting the old senior center to an arts annex because the Library Cultural Center is just bursting to overflowing with arts programs, so they are going to go to the old senior center. We expect more housing to be built, including rental units of all types with the involvement of government, other levels of government, and other partners. And we also expect to receive the formal development application for Duck Island. This is the largest infrastructure project in Richmond's history. It's right beside the River Rock Casino, basically where the night market has been for the past number of years. When that is finished over the years, you'll find 4 million square feet of new hotel, office, and commercial floor space, plus parkland, plus publicly accessible open spaces, and much, much more. And we're going to continue to work, I'm going to say work with other levels of government. We're going to push the hell out of these guys. We want the George Massey Crossing to move along. Now, this picture is a little confusing. This is the Stevenson interchange, which is a big part of the project. That is part of the overall George Massey Crossing project, and they are actively working on it as we speak. So that's kind of a current picture. Dredging of the Stevenson Channel is another priority that we need to work with our partners and really give a push. And then finally, of course, the hospital tower. We will do everything in our power to make sure that that project goes ahead as promised. So Richmond has always been a civic leader, as our city council has enacted bold, innovative, sustainable programs and strategies for the benefit of our residents and our businesses. The city is well supported by staff, partners, and the volunteers. To ensure that Richmond remains a safe and resilient city, the many achievements during 2022 will improve the civic environment and the quality of life for all. We are all confident that Richmond will remain very strong for future generations. Thank you very much. And with that, I think we're going to have a Q&A, right, Shayna? Come on up.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brodie. I'm going to invite you to take one of those chairs here. What a fantastic address, and it's wonderful to see, coming back from the pandemic, how much the city has been able to accomplish in the past year and years. It's now my pleasure to introduce the moderator of today's Fireside Chat and Q&A, Nancy Small. She is also a director of our Chamber of Commerce, and I apologize, I neglected to say her name earlier today. Nancy leads the dynamic team of tourism professionals at Tourism Richmond. It's a nonprofit, stakeholder-driven destination marketing organization promoting Richmond to residents, leisure travelers, meeting planners, travel media, and organizations that influence travel. They also work closely with travel and tourism industry stakeholders and municipal officials, like the mayor, to enhance and position Richmond as a can't-miss part of Metro Vancouver. In Richmond, we are home to YVR, beautiful nature, incredible coastline, world-famous dining, and a vibrant cultural diversity. They all combine to make Richmond an exciting and appealing destination to visitors from all over the world, and ensure that tourism is a key driver of our economy. So without further ado, I will introduce our Fireside Chat moderator today, Nancy Small.
Thank you, Shada.
And encourage you to ask your own questions as well. We have two chamber staff members in the room, Alina Hussein and Wei Chen, who are on hand with microphones. So please raise your hand if you'd like to speak, and they'll make your way over to you. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, let's get going. Mayor Brodie. So this is my 4th time doing this, and can't really believe that the last 2 times, which hopefully many of you were present for, I put in quotation marks online, that was weird, and this is not. So I'm very happy to be here. I think we did pretty well the last couple of years.
I think so.
I think we did. But being in person in a room full of professionals and colleagues I never will take that for granted again, and especially within my world, the tourism world, this is something that we're incredibly grateful for, and I want to say thank you to Shayna for allowing us to have an opportunity to lead this discussion. Before I get into the questions, please indulge me for one moment, because I do want to think about a year ago when we were actually in this facility, and it was one of the very first conference events after the pandemic, and Richmond was privileged to host the tourism conference for BC Tourism Conference in our city. And I was so proud of our city. We blew everybody's socks off, frankly. And it was an incredibly proud moment for me and for the board and for our colleagues here. So thank you for that memory, because it is about a year ago, actually, right now. So coming together, this is a really important part for us to connect, and I think the city has done a phenomenal job, as you have said, and gone through the things that you're planning to do, big aspirations, big plans, and big changes that have happened at some of the senior levels of the city. So any changes that Serena, anyone's going to do, or any big plans, or any changes in direction that you see? Because I think it's really important for us to, if there are going to be any, like to know about them.
You're talking about as the result of the changes in personnel.
There's been some pretty major changes to some of the senior
There have
personnel.
been. I was reminded the other day that since 1973, 50 years ago, we've had 3 mayors. Remember Gil Blair, Greg Halsey-Brandt, and me. George Duncan, he was our CAO for 25 years. So if you look to the makeup of council, you look to the makeup of our senior staff. Longevity and being there for a long time to make the plans and then to be able to carry them out is really important in the city of Richmond. Now that assumes that you like the direction that things are going, of course. I can say that on council, every time we have a new council, there's at least 1 or 2 new councillors on that council who bring fresh ideas and perspectives, and I think that that's a really important part of the entire process. From the staff's point of view, our new CAO is a longtime staff member. Succession planning has always been very important to the city as an organization, and I'm sure to all of your organizations as well. So I'm not looking for not thinking that there's going to be some super spectacular, bold, new direction. There will be the implementation of the prior plans, and we'll move forward. So I think that, I think longevity has done well for us.
100% agree, and I'm glad to hear that personally. I think the trajectory of this city is the sky's the limit, frankly, for this city. You gave some examples, some really exciting examples, actually, of key projects that are changing the face of our city, actually, as we kind of drive by and see them, as I drive down Number 3 Road and seeing Capstan Station and just all the development. It's really exciting, and some really good things happening. And then as we go through, or as you go through the official community plan engagement, maybe you could share with this audience how we can get involved, because I think it's going to be really important for this group to make sure that the voices are heard from business community and the community at large.
So every 10 years, we review the official community plan. It's a requirement by law that we must go through this process. And I don't know what iteration we're on, probably the 5th or 6th iteration. I think that this version of the official community plan is going to be more challenging on one hand, but also gives us way more possibilities to rethink what we are wanting to do. Housing, development, affordability are going to be key drivers for it. The environment is always very important, other quality of life aspects. So in terms of getting involved, I'm sure that the Chamber is going to be involved in the stakeholder consultations. There will be plenty of public discussions about it, and the opportunity for each one of you here today, if you want to get involved in that review, you can do it.
Thank you. That's really important to understand. Thank you very much. You talked about the city's role with provincial counterparts and federal counterparts as well, which I think is really important given the size of our city and the importance of our city in the province and in the country. Can you talk about a little bit some of the climate change impact work that you're doing and how you're pushing some of the provincial and federal counterparts on that?
For climate change, I see the city, the province, the feds all having very important roles, but somewhat different. Being a fan of local government, I believe that it is local government that is really implementing and driving the climate change agenda. Now, that's not to take it away from the province and the federal government. It's just that right here we are implementing the visions that we see for addressing climate change and the effects of it. Now, if you look to the federal government, take housing, for instance, kind of related to the environment. Years ago, the federal government was very involved in the actual implementation of programs. So there are many co-op complexes around Richmond. They were all actually implemented by the federal government. They got out of that business in the 90s. They will supply some money from time to time. So a good example of how they will get involved, Parm will tell you that there's the Rapid Housing Initiative, which is a way to get monies to the city, and the city is really responsible for the implementation of what is going to take place, and we're going to hear a lot more about that initiative in the days and months to come. But that's more or less how the federal government will get involved, by giving the money for the capital and sometimes some operating, but mostly for capital. Now, the province is kind of in the middle. They set policy parameters like the federal government does, but they also get involved in the actual implementation of it as well. So I showed Astor Place. That's a good example on housing of the province, getting directly involved in the support of housing for people. Childcare is another one where the province has been really very heavily involved. Both the federal government and the provincial government have been involved in the $10 a day daycare. So I just see the roles of the three levels being different, being important, but I just think that the city is really driving, if we don't pick up on the initiatives and get the grant money and get the partnerships, it just isn't going to happen.
I think that's a great position to be in, and those partnerships are critical, obviously, for the three biggest challenges facing really society now, which is childcare, affordability, housing, and climate change. And then all of that affects the business that we're all trying to grow and protect here in our city. Anybody have any questions? I can keep going, or Shayna, where are the microphones? If anybody has any questions, maybe just holler, because I can't really see, but anyway. You don't have to be a shy crowd, but if you want to be shy, I can keep going. So, okay. So you've been, oh, okay. Nope. Dan? Okay, great. Please, why don't you go ahead?
Anyway, thank you for, the leading that whole Richmond, the leadership. Really, thank you for everything. I stay in the 27 year in Richmond. I do the business almost 22 years here in Richmond. I really love it. Business is growing. Just my kind of concern now is I'm looking for more warehouse. I have like 5,000 square feet that the warehouse currently I have. Lease finished in November. Okay, 3 years ago I paid 13.5. Okay, now I'm looking for 5,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet. They ask $28. Okay, per square feet. When I see this situation, is something wrong. I know that the affordability for that house for people, but for the business, from 13.5 to $28 per square feet. is too much significant. It's very hard for even our agency is cannot find other warehouse. Okay, so it's very hard situation. I don't know what I will do that after November. So any plan for the industrial or warehouse kind of that the area that you want to build up here?
Of course, the affordability, the rent levels is not something governed by the city, but it is obviously a very important criterion for the businesses. And the short answer is, do we have any ideas as to where you might be able to go? You can start talking to our city staff and to the real estate people as well, who may be able to give you some guidance. But it does raise a specific point that I want to talk about, and I touched on it in my remarks about the industrial intensification. We don't have a lot of vacant industrial space. We just don't, even though we have so much of it. And right across the region, that's the case as well. So what we have done is we've focused with our economic development people on the intensification of the use of industrial space in the city. So instead of just having a warehouse, just your standard rectangular warehouse, maybe an office on the mezzanine as you go in, and the rest of it is just this industrial space, talking about intensifying it. So for the right business model, maybe allowing the building to go up to a second floor, if it can be accommodated. Talking about thinking, say, a microbrewery. You've got research and development, you've got manufacturing, you've got retail all in the one location. That kind of a strategy to be able to extend that to other areas may assist a great deal with a lot of the industries who want to stay in Richmond, but have the kind of challenge that you've got. So when I talk about the microbreweries, that's just one example, but I think it does make the point of how you can have more than just a rectangular warehouse in a location, and that's all you can do is warehouse your goods.
Great question. Thank you very much. 22 years as mayor, is my number correct?
Yes.
22 years. My research was right. Actually, you told me that, so I hope it was right. So what have you? I mean, obviously, you've seen a lot of changes, not only in this city, but in processes, the way things work, and I think planning this city, and as we move into the OCP engagement, what things are you seeing now that you didn't see 22 years ago in those processes of getting developments to market and actually moving things forward around planning specifically?
Well, there's two aspects that really occur to me right off the bat, and if other people want to ask other questions about other aspects of this, by all means, put up your hand and we'll ask away. But two things occur to me. Before I got involved in public service of this sort, before I was elected to council in the mid-1990s, the council of the day, they developed a plan to take the growth in the city center. The higher densities would be in the city center and along the arterials. All of that would be an effort to make the development more oriented towards public transportation. And I think a lot of the development that you're seeing today in the various locations and on the arterial roads reflects that kind of an approach to densify and to leave the single-family neighborhoods, as long as we can anyway, more or less alone and have the higher density elsewhere. So that we're seeing that come to fruition. Now, the second thing, in my remarks, every time I talked about a development, I said, X number of units, and there's affordable housing and market rentals and low-end market rentals and less than market rentals and subsidized market rentals, all that kind of thing. When I first started, when I was a councillor, we never talked about affordable housing. Certainly it was not a long conversation if we did. And now, and secondary suites. We had no secondary suites. They weren't allowed in the single-family neighborhoods. I can remember going way back that there was a real protest over the idea that there would be secondary suites. And now you have all this affordable housing from the largest complex to the smallest complex. There's always an affordable housing component to it. And, the rentals of the various kinds. We live in British Columbia, in 2023. We know that there's a housing crisis. We know that people need the rentals. And the development community is working with the city, and we're getting as many up as we can. So I think the trend towards the rentals and the affordable housing, and also the recognition of the transit-oriented development, I think we're really seeing that right now as it plays out.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from the floor, or anybody else want to either build on that topic or something else? Don't see anybody. Talk to me about business travel. So that's in your mind where you see from the corporation of the city of Richmond, because that's something from, just so everybody's aware, it's been one of the slowest things to come back in the tourism industry. So this is probably a selfish question, because I always want people to get out there and travel, but certainly leisure demand was good in 2022. We definitely saw some really good demand here in Richmond and in British Columbia. But business travel and even meetings and events, conferences are still slow to come back, probably about half of where they were in terms of the trajectory. So we've got a lot of work to do on that with our partners. But where does the city of Richmond, what's your philosophy on that, I guess?
Well, I think travel for business is coming back. I remember when the shutdown occurred, I think I had like 5 trips of various kinds planned. 4 of those 5 were on business. They all got canceled, and now that we're kind of emerging from that, many of those same trips actually are now back on the books. And I have to travel, not often, but I do have to travel sometimes, whether it's to Victoria, to Ottawa, or other places.
All the hot spots.
All the hot spots, yes. We'll leave that one alone. But in terms, I think the biggest thing that has really affected travel, I think, are the fact that people have discovered Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all those other platforms that can really transform you from this place to another place very easily, very efficiently, cost effectively, and you don't have to go to Boston for that conference. You can just be there virtually. And I think that has to, just like the fact that people aren't coming into their office space as much as they used to, I think that has to be affecting the market.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I don't know about any of you, but I'd be happy if I was never on another Zoom call. But the reality is we are, and it is very efficient, very functional. Does it work if you're trying to sell something? Not so much. If you're having a very transactional discussion, yes, it can work. But I don't think there's any other replacement for this type of event. So, but that's great. That's great. You're getting back on the road to the hot spots of Victoria and Ottawa. Any other questions? Shana, how much time do we have left? One more question from the floor, and then I can finish off with my last question. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody have any burning questions? Now's the time. The hot seat is here. No, nobody wants to put him on the hot seat. Nice crowd today. Very good, very good. The ambition I talked about, and I think driven by yours and council and senior city staff leadership, is very admirable, and I think we all should acknowledge that. Very ambitious. What do you think the biggest, if you could boil it down in the next couple of years, the biggest challenge that you're seeing within this city, and where you want to take the city, but how we're going to overcome a challenge?
Of course, if you look to the various operations of the city, just like the operations of any of your corporations or your institutions, there are issues at every level, every step of the way. There's going to be some hurdles that have to be overcome. But I think it's what I talked about before, the official community plan. It is up to us this term, and we've got 3.5 years now to do it, and the process is well underway to revise the official community plan and to make sure it reflects the Richmond that we want for today and tomorrow, incorporating all the values, the changes, and the evolutions, and where we see the city going. That's going to be a huge project. I hope the Chamber can help us out, and all of you can be a part of that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it.